Welcome to Two Therapists Talking. The hope for this podcast is to talk about important issues related to couples and individuals who are struggling in their lives with many different issues. I'm David Thompson, a marriage and family therapist.
And I'm Sherie Christensen, marriage and family therapist. Please join us as we explore these issues together, and we hope you will learn and be enlightened along the way. Come find us at twotherapisttalking.com. If you like what you're hearing, please get on and rate us and subscribe to the podcast.
Hi, and welcome back to Two Therapists Talking. I'm David.
And I'm Sherie.
And we have spent a lot of time talking about a lot of different things. And often we want to do a new concept or idea. This time, though, I want to come back to what was probably my very favorite episodes. And this is early on.
Yes.
And so if you're a regular, I mean, this is over a year ago, early on.
We're going way back.
Way back to like the 6th and 7th episodes.
Yep.
On empathy. And I think it's really the most important episodes. All are important, but These are my favorite. And I change and update this stuff a lot over time. And there's just a lot of good information that I want to add to the empathy skills building episodes.
Yes. And this, I think, is one of the reasons it's the most important, one of the most popular, all of that is because this is about communication.
Yeah.
And I don't think there's a couple that comes into our office that isn't there, at least in part, for communication skills, right?
Right. Even if they don't think they are.
Right.
They start to demonstrate how they talk about important things, and it's not always effective.
Yes. So that's what we're doing. We're just talking more about communication, and that's what empathy skills building is about. And we're going to add some tips, some rules to remember as you're communicating with each other. So it's like empathy communication episodes. I think we'll do probably 2 of these.
Yeah, and if you want a refresher, you can listen to episodes 6 and 7. Although I'm learning that on Spotify, which is what I use, the episode numbers aren't next to the titles, which is so funny. I used to have it in the title, but I thought it was redundant. I must have been looking at
iTunes,
Apple, and it was like episode 7. So I'm like, okay, I don't need to put it in twice. But Spotify, there's none at all, so you have to just read the titles.
Count.
So
You're counting up.
I need to figure that out.
2, 3.
I know, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's a pain.
Episode 45. Oh, man.
I know. Okay, so...
So we're not going to go through the steps of the empathy skills building process because that is in episode 6 and 7. What we want to talk about are kind of general rules to remember when you're looking at communicating or doing things that are more challenging in your communication. We're going to look at, we're going to give you a little sneak peek. We got a new empathy script and empathic statements that are going to be really helpful, not just if you're sitting down to do an empathy skills session, but these are just phrases that are going to be so useful to connect with your spouse, with your children, with anyone that you're in a relationship with. And then we just got rules, tips, those kinds of things. We're just gonna throw a bunch more communication stuff at you and give you some ideas for how to improve how you're communicating with all of your close relationships.
Yeah, I like that. And everybody needs more communication help anyway. So, but if you're really interested, you can always go back to those episodes and it'll walk you through step by step. And this is definitely supplemental, and we'll maybe refer back to some of that or parts of that. But like Sherie said, this can be in any conversation at any time, anywhere, whereas that empathy or practicing empathy from those episodes is a lot more structured and takes longer.
Yes.
So this is for normal speech all the time.
And I think too, like we talked about in those episodes, it's a structured skill set, but then as you practice those empathy skill building, that exercise, you get to the point where you don't really need the structure of it, and you can kind of figure out how to do that on your own and whatnot. So All good communication stuff. Here we
Yes.
go.
So this is a really good one. It's something that I learned kind of the hard way, but is really obvious when you think about it. So if you want to have empathy for someone, and just as a kind of reminder, empathy is four things, at least this is how we identify it. It's a lot more than this, but it's perspective taking, it's staying out of judgment, it's recognizing emotion in other people and communicating that emotion. And this is why a lot of us are hung up, because we're not very good at recognizing emotion or communicating emotion.
Right.
It's kind of how you're raised. And if your family didn't use emotion language or identify that, it's going to be a little bit foreign. But here's what we know for sure. Empathy will not be present if you're in shame.
Yes.
And when people ask what's like the key to good relationships, boy, that's wide open and there's a lot there. But the more I do this, the more I think managing your shame actually is probably the best thing you could do. If you're in shame, you won't be able to show up in empathy.
Yes.
And so, well, that opens a whole door of, you need to manage your shame. That's true. And we have episodes on that. So
yes. So go back to those too.
we're not going to say much about that now, but definitely know that if you are reactive or defensive, there's some shame thing going on. And if you need to start with a simpler, like let's say you're practicing empathy, but the issue they're sharing about is really triggering, probably because it's you.
Yeah, it's about you.
Please choose a different topic that's not related, and that'll be easier. So maybe, what's your most embarrassing moment in high school, or when's a time that mom and dad really let you down? And I want to really hear you. And since it's not about me, I'm less likely to go into shame.
Yes, so much easier to empathize. I love that as just a general tool of practicing empathy, is to start with things that don't have to do with you.
Yeah.
That's a really, really great tip. And then when they are about you, you can take a break, right? Like we talked about with empathy skills, in that structured setting, you definitely want to take breaks, but that's something you can absolutely do in other situations. For example, I literally had one of those moments just this past week. As I had my daughter plays football. I was at practice, and I had my dog there, and she was just loving it, just running all over the place. And I was keeping her mostly away from everybody, but every once in a while she gets super excited about what was going on. I mean, they're throwing balls, and at one point one of the leaders was like, hey, one of the team mom was she's very, very involved. And she was like, hey, can we just get rid of the dog? And so I took her and I left, and I was like, yeah, absolutely. And, I could feel this little shame thing going on, like, oh, I just feel so bad. And, and so on the drive home, so this is a break, right? This is me taking a break from the situation. And I just was able to sit with it, and I just kind of sat with it. I was like, is that legitimate? I knew it was a legitimate ask, right? Like, that makes perfect sense. But I could still feel the shame around it. And so I just sat with that for a little while and just, okay, totally legitimate thing. And I can be totally fine with that. And I want to reach out and just let them know that I see that was a perfectly acceptable ask for them to make, da-da-da-da-da. So I did. I texted, and I was like, hey, thanks for calling me out on that. That was totally legit. Apologize that, she was in the way. And, if we have her there in the future, I'll definitely make sure to really make sure she's not in the middle of things. And just a little bit later, she called me back and was like, hey, it's totally fine. It was really, really okay. It was just this right at this moment. We were waiting for this. There was somebody that was supposed to show up, and technically nobody's allowed to have dogs, but everybody brings them anyway. And so I didn't want, when that person showed up, for there to be, a dog there. And so it was totally fine, and we were able to work through it. But it required my releasing my own shame and acknowledging the validity of what was going on and all of that before we could kind of get through that whole thing.
And that brings up a really good point, that your awareness of where you're at and how you're feeling, and being able to take time and space to come back to reality. The reality of it's situational, it's not a judgment, it's not
she
a
doesn't
criticism.
Hate me.
You're okay, yeah. Awesome example. And we all ought to be doing this a lot more than we do. So thank you.
Yeah, it's a little bit tricky sometimes. So the next one that we want to talk about is when we're listening in empathy to someone else, it's not about us.
Right.
And it's important not to make it about us.
It seems so simple, right?
Yes.
But this is like a subconscious, we do this even when we're not aware that we're doing this. We want to be understood so bad that we're listening for a break in the conversation so that we can get our stuff in to convince our partner or the person we're talking to.
Yes.
But that's not what empathy is.
Mm-hmm. And this even happens, even if it's not like, okay, there's an issue we're bringing up and we're that's a concern and we need to talk about it, and then but this is the reason why I did, and we kind of get in those spaces. This is actually generally, like, it's even more generally important, right? So I grew up in a family where we talked over each other all the time, and it was like just this constant, like when you tell a story and whatever, and someone else is like, oh yeah, and theirs is bigger and more intense or whatever, right? So that was kind of the culture of that space, and that takes away empathy. Right? And there's this fine line between because you can share your experience, but you have to be aware of how you're doing it, and is that taking away from theirs.
Right.
So a friend of mine who's also a therapist just the other day used this phrase that I totally loved. And she said, oh, okay. I was sharing, some things, and she's like, oh, okay. And we were talking, and so, okay. So if I'm looking at this from like my ability to understand where you're coming from, or my ability to empathize, this is sort of my situation that I'm noticing the similarities, right? Because it is important to share back and forth, and that sharing is connecting. But it's when we kind of take over and now what I'm saying is more important than what you said is kind of where that line is.
And you see how it's about you at that point.
Yes.
It's not about the person who's sharing. It's about you one-upping or nothing, bad intention, but just getting the attention back on you.
Yes. Yes, exactly.
So ideally, if you're going to practice empathy, you will have your turn. So hopefully that helps you to be a little more patient. This isn't always going to be, I'm always listening and you're always talking. And that's how this relationship is.
If it is, then you need to make some adjustments.
Yes, please do. And kind of along those same lines, something that I know is helpful is if you're having a conversation and the other person is sharing and it's something that you did, don't explain why you did it. Now, sometimes that can be helpful. This is mostly referring to if conversations are escalated or becoming heated or upset, the time will come to share why, and their heart will be open enough to receive it. But if this is not going well and you're trying to end the conflict or the contention by explaining why, it probably won't land. And so when you're practicing empathy, it's all about tell me how that made you feel. And once they've de-escalated and calmed down, the why will make a lot more sense for them. So
don't throw it out first.
Yep.
And I think sometimes when you are throwing that out first, like it negates what they're feeling, and almost can come across sounding like, well, I have a good reason for hurting you, right?
Right, and we all do that all the time. Well, I did it because of this.
Yes.
But how often does that actually work to calm the situation down?
Okay.
They will jump right to something else because it's not about that. It's about how they feel. And if you keep it on facts, but they're in feelings, you're having a head-to-heart conversation, and that doesn't work.
Right. Yes, and I like that we can circle back around once people feel heard and seen in their hearts and their emotions, then all of the facts then make sense.
Yeah.
The whys. And
it's like,
then
be
you
patient.
Can have that. Yes.
You'll get there just in a different way than you think. Yep.
Absolutely. So the other one, another one that fits along with that is you're not trying to agree, right? So somebody else is having a conversation with you about something that you did or, they're upset about that involves you. you don't have to agree with their perspective.
Right.
You don't even have to agree with how they're seeing the facts necessarily.
Right.
It's not about that. It's about going, oh, if you had this set of facts and it made this meaning about those facts, then it would make sense that you would feel like this. And I am empathizing with that.
Right.
I'm not even touching the facts or the meaning necessarily and telling them they're right or wrong. Like, that's not even on the table. It's, I can see how you got to this point, and I would not want you to feel like that. That would be really hard.
Right.
Right.
Yep. And that's exactly it. It gives you opportunity to express care and concern for how they're feeling. Because, so you hear this a lot, because I'm very fond of saying this, mental health is a commitment to reality at all costs.
Yes.
And what we try to do is come back to reality. Well, remember,
Yes.
even if their feelings aren't based in reality, they're still valid.
Feelings are real.
They're real. They're feeling them. It's not like they're not
Yes.
feeling them. And so you can't get them back to reality by challenging how they feel, because that's really confusing. It would be like being very angry and the person is saying you're not angry. That wouldn't make sense to you.
Right.
You'd be saying, what are you talking about? You have no idea what's going on right now. That's kind of what we're doing.
Yes.
So the way to help them back to reality, if they need to come back to reality,
Which,
maybe
yeah,
they don't, but
they really might not.
even if they're wrong, once their feelings are validated, they'll be a lot more open to hear what it is you have to say. So
Right.
feelings may not be based in reality, but they're always valid.
Yes,
So
but they're
try to
always
remember that.
their own reality. Right. So we're living in the reality of this is their feeling.
Yeah, I call it their
that's-
perspective.
Yeah.
Just because then we
Yes.
have multiple realities.
Yes,
We're like
that's
doing
true.
a
That's a
Marvel
good way
movie
to
now or something. Too confusing, losing interest. But yeah,
Yes. Yeah. It's their perspective, and that's important. So, when we talk about, we're doing that structured empathy skills, right? That I think is one of the number one things that we have to talk about with clients and go back to is like, let it go. It's
Yeah.
not about their facts. It's not about their, like, the meaning that they're making it is wrong, like whether or not that's right or wrong. Like, it's completely irrelevant to what you're doing. You're, again, taking the facts as they saw them, the meaning that they made,
right,
and being able to say, oh, I see how you got there, and that would be
Right.
really hard.
right.
Yeah.
Yep. And by the way, this is a really good principle when we're talking about communication. Lots of times couples will struggle to have face-to-face verbal communication.
Yes.
And a really good workaround is to write. You can either do texting or email or something like that. You'd be surprised how de-escalated things can be in writing. So I hear couples all the time, we try this and it's not working. Do it in writing. So do it by
Yes.
text. And they'll come in and say, yeah, so we text back and forth. It takes longer, but you're able to think a lot more about what they're saying and process. And a lot of us, remember, are just slower processors. I'm definitely a slower processor. If I'm texting with somebody, I think about it a lot differently.
Yes.
And so if you need to, there's no shame in saying, hey, this conversation face-to-face isn't going very well. Let's move to writing.
Right.
I'll take a break, you take a break, I'll go for a drive, whatever. Don't text and drive, go to a parking lot or a park and text, but try it in writing.
Yeah. Yeah. And also try a different situation or circumstance. Like you can lay down on the ground and
Yeah.
try talking that way. You can try talking back to back where you're not like looking at each other in the face. That can be helpful,
Yep.
some of those other things, but writing is super helpful sometimes.
Yeah, it's funny. If you're ever really angry and you're in a conversation, I mean, if you're too angry, you won't do anything anyway that you're asked or directed to do. But if you're in that, I'm not too angry yet, but I am angry, like lie flat on your back. And we maybe even mention that. But it's hard to be really angry in a conversation with somebody lying
Yeah.
flat on your back on the
or
ground.
your stomach. Yeah.
It's just like your body's like, what is going on here? And it changes it. So there's fun things like that.
Yeah.
And actually, anger management techniques would be a really good episode
Yes.
too. So more to come on that.
Here we go. We're just getting super excited about all the things. We have all these ideas. Okay, so another thing to think about as you're thinking about empathy is that you have to do empathy with thoughts and feelings. So you need to be able to kind of paraphrase or like put in your own words the experience in that they're communicating in words, but you also need to reflect and rephrase and work with their emotions, right? And that's where that emotion wheel can come in really handy.
Yeah.
Where you can look at those words and go, okay, they're saying they're feeling sad. And then you can reflect back and use words that are different than sad, but are more nuanced to try to help them understand themselves or you to understand them better. Are you disappointed? Are you hurt? Are you irritated? You know, whatever that is.
Yeah. So if you're not going to do a full-on empathy skills building, practicing empathy conversation, which is totally reasonable, we can't always do that. A lot of people will come in here and they say, I want to start incorporating more empathy, but it's not going to work to sit down and say, this is what we're doing. I just have to do it in other ways.
They don't even know what we're doing.
Right.
I just, using this with my boss or
Exactly. And for good reason, it's not ever going to be done that way. Or I just need some way to be empathetic that's not so involved or long. There are some really cool, you could say, phrases or statements that we can use. And so this will be helpful. We're just going to go through them.
Yes.
And
this isn't just for, you can use this outside, but it's also super helpful, right? These are the types of phrases that as we're coaching people as they're using the script, these are the types of phrases we're like, oh, try this phrase, try saying it like this.
Yep.
And so super helpful if you're doing empathy skills. It gives you a lot of tips and just options, and you can kind of find what works for you the best. But then again, like David's saying, this is totally usable in all these other situations that you're coming across in life that you just want to be a little bit more empathetic.
And I actually added this because I had a lot of clients who were very right-brained, engineer, cognitive types. And they're like, I just don't even know how to say an
What's the right
empathy
words?
thing. Yeah. So this can be really helpful, and it has been really helpful to a lot of them. So as you
really
hear these, write down your favorites and start to incorporate them and see what you think. But
okay. So we're going to go down some options for empathy, script, and understanding.
I have empathy script and empathic
I know,
statements. They're all the same.
They're all the same.
You could just say, here are some empathy
These
phrases
ones are
or
more
statements.
about...
I mean, the ones on the left are a little more, you got to fill it in.
Right. I'm trying to think of how that... They're more like...
a little more like getting feedback from the other person, right?
Yeah, like after they've... well, no, I guess they're both after they shared. Yeah. Okay, well, we'll just kind of go down.
There's not a real clear
So I'll back up a little bit since I kind of was like... So we're going to go ahead and just list off some of these options for you. So... I guess we can just go back and forth and I'll say one and then David can say one. Okay, so the first one is no wife, husband, or whoever it is you're speaking to should ever blank, right? So should ever have to feel like they're going to be abandoned or worried about if they're going to feel heard or, anything like that. So it's a blank, fill in the blank, right? So no blank, no wife, husband, relationship, whatever that is, should ever blank. Ever have to feel blank.
Another good one is just a simple, I'm sorry that you blank. So a little more than I'm sorry, but it shows recognition of whatever that is. I'm sorry that you blank.
Yeah. And especially, again, remember, this isn't, I'm sorry that you fact, right? It's I'm sorry that you felt or were experienced these feelings, right?
Yep.
Okay, the fact that blank is evidence that blank.
Yep.
These
Two
are just
blanks.
sound
This
so
is our
funny.
only two blank ones.
Yes, it sounds funny to say it that way. So the fact that you are hurting is evidence to me that you really care. Maybe.
Yep.
As an example.
The fact that you're so angry is evidence that I've really hurt you.
Yeah.
Any statement like that is really insightful for them.
Yes.
And so
yes.
I know there's two blanks, and it sounds complicated, but you practice this and it'll land well, definitely.
Yes.
You're right about blank. This seems like an obvious one, but we don't use this very well or very often. Just you're right about this thing. That sounds good to hear it in a conversation, especially if it's a little bit escalated, to hear you're right about this. It sounds good.
Yep. Okay, you must be feeling blank.
At any time, you can just drop this in a conversation. You must be feeling blank.
You must be feeling hurt. You must be feeling unseen.
I want to reassure you that blank. This is a good one. I love anything that says I want to reassure you. I want to reassure you that you're important to me, that I hear you, that I love you, anything you want. But reassurances are good. Okay.
Again, I'm sorry that you blank. Remember, again, that's a feeling. That's a feeling statement. We're going for the feelings of it. So, again, I'm sorry that you felt like I abandoned you. I'm sorry that you felt like I was upset or, whatever that is.
A simple question, what can I do for you right now? Because we don't ask that very often. Again, we're so caught up in what I want you to do.
Yeah.
What can I do for you right now? I mean, be genuine and sincere. Don't say it if you don't mean it.
Right.
Be open to whatever they might say, but ask the question.
Yeah. What do you need? What do you need right now? What can I provide for you right now? I love that. Let me tell you what I want for you.
This is a good one. This is step 5.
Or even, may I share what I want with you, right?
Yeah,
like give them
may I
permission to be able to open if they want that, right in that moment. And you're right. Yeah, it goes back to that step 5 and the empathy skills structure of sharing what you want for them. And several of these actually fit into that step 5 space, right? Yeah. I would never want you to feel all the things that you felt abandoned and unheard and unseen and pain. And so this is similar to that, but in the positive sense. I would always want you to feel seen. I would always want you to feel heard and accepted and worthy and loved.
And in addition to those blanks, here's just some statements you can make anytime in any conversation where it fits. You're making complete sense.
This is my favorite. Like if you have done therapy with me, this is probably the one I go to the absolute most. That makes complete sense. I think I've
validating.
Said that many times on here.
Yep.
Because again, the thing that I always say, if you really understand someone, they make sense. And so what a beautiful thing to go through an empathy, whether it's a structured empathy skills or whether you're just being empathetic with someone and you've gone through, if you remember when you're doing that, we talk about it's really critical to go all the way and understand them completely. Right. Don't leave anything out. Is there anything else? Is there anything else? So that you really fully 100% understand them. And then to get to that point and to be able to look at them and go, oh my gosh, that makes perfect sense. So I love that one. That was my favorite. Okay.
All right.
I had to jump in there because I was like, oh, you got to say my favorite one. Another one is, I think I understand how you feel, right? And again, this is not going to be useful until you've done the whole thing, right? It can be useful, but
you got to say it a certain way.
Yes.
You have to have a certain intention about it.
Yes.
Like, I think I understand how you feel, which is an open, it's not closed. You're not ending things by saying that. You're still open.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. You're definitely not, you don't want to shut it down. But understanding how they feel, for them to feel that you're really understanding is really helpful.
And this next one, you can change the wording on this a little bit, but here's the core of it. I just feel such sadness and pain in you when you talk about this.
Yeah.
So it's recognition that there's a lot going on for them when they're talking. And again, very validating if they hear this.
Yes. Yeah. Or I can sense, I'm sensing a lot of sadness or pain or.
Yep.
Yeah. And that would feel so hard.
This topic, this experience is really important to you or had a big impact on you. Anything like that. Yep.
Yeah. Okay. Here's a good one when someone's feeling really stuck. It feels like an impossible spot you're in. Does that feel impossible to you?
It's good recognition.
Yeah.
I can feel the pain you feel. Now that one, use it if you actually feel their pain.
Right.
Don't just use it casually, but if you're listening to them, you will to some degree. And so share that you do. That again shows active listening and they know that you're paying attention.
Yeah. And you can even kind of clarify it by saying, man, I can feel that pain that you're feeling and recognizing I'm probably not even feeling it near the extent that you are.
Yeah.
Right. So that they're able to kind of see and feel that, okay, I'm feeling heard and seen, but also they're not going to feel it all as much as I'm feeling it. Mm-hmm. And they recognize that. They're not like, oh, I got it. Let's move on.
Yeah.
I need to pay attention when you're in this much pain.
This is one of my favorites for sure.
This is really beautiful.
Sherie has her favorite, and this is probably my favorite. I need to pay attention when you're in this much pain. What a validating phrase to hear that.
Yes, that is really, really beautiful and gentle. I like that one a lot. I wish you didn't have to go through this.
Yeah.
That's another one.
We don't say that a lot, but we feel it, and it's one of those sad things where we don't say as much as we could, and it would help if we did say more. But I think that one, we don't want people that we love to be going through the hard things they go through. So share that.
Yeah.
Just say it.
All right. Lots of empathetic statements that you can use. Lots of tips and tools in communication and empathy. And we're going to come back next time and we'll share another batch of communication tips with you.
Thanks so much for joining us.
We'll see you next time. Thank you for listening to Two Therapists Talking. We look forward to sharing more conversations with you. Connect with us at twotherapisttalking.com or email podcast@twotherapisttalking.com. If you like what you're hearing, please get on and rate us and subscribe to the podcast.